Well, I have not done... Oh, let's get this crap all straightened out. I have not done a video since last year. Happy New Year, as an aside. I wanted to do kind of a follow-up to Rogue One. I mean, I didn't feel the need to, but after I did my review, which is spoiler-free, this will be a very spoiler-rich review. If you haven't seen Rogue One by now, get out from under that rock, leave the cave, go watch Rogue One. I actually liked it quite a lot. But what was interesting to me, the impetus for this video, is that at the end of that video, briefly, when I do reviews, I do like kind of a two-part. And just a follow-up, let's explain why. Generally, I don't think letter grades or, terrific to shitty are really useful because it's purely subjective. I mean, how do you objectively review art and pop culture and things that rely a lot on preferences and context, which will be different for everyone? So I generally do a review of what are the odds you'll see it and not like it that I think is objective. Like, if it's a movie that some people will like, but I think most people won't, I think there's good odds you won't like it, even though I personally might think it's an excellent film. And then whether or not I would see it again, which I think is relevant to a review as well. For example, I love the... what is his name? The guy who did Dune back in the 80s. Regardless. Love Dune. I love the 4-hour version. But after sitting through it once, would I want to see it right away again? The answer is no. Because it's a slog. It's a great film. It's a great story. But it doesn't have the same replayability that other stuff would. In my Rogue One review, I'm never going to be happy with this camera. In my Rogue One review, I thought there was a very good chance that you'd see it and like it. And I wanted to keep it spoiler-free, so I couldn't go into why, but there's definitely, in my mind, a caveat there. And because this was a very different movie, and you can't really explain it without spoiling the hell out of it. The thing is, I wanted to do this kind of follow-up because I was so wrong. Oh my god, I was so wrong. Like, some people hated this movie, and that was shocking to me. And I was like going through reviews and stuff, because some people loved it, and some people really did not like this film, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And the why is interesting to me, and I want to go through that. So when I reviewed Rogue One, and I said, I think the odds that you'll see it and not like it were very low, my thinking was, okay, here's the spoiler stuff that I didn't want to say. This movie is very dark. I would argue darker than Empire. In fact, I'm not going to say that's debatable. It's definitely darker than Empire. It's kind of depressing. I mean, there are multiple moments that I was a little choked up, and I could see someone more involved in this movie flat out crying. It's not something you usually get in your wacky space adventure. So, depressing and grounded. In most of Star Wars, the characters tend to be very extreme. Look at the original Star Wars from 78 or whatever. The original crew that's in the Millennium Falcon: Princess Leia, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, R2, C-3PO, and Chewbacca. None of those characters are even remotely similar to each other. One's a furry monster, two are robots that are completely different kinds of robots. One is a space princess, one is a young, kind of very much our young protagonist guy on the hero's journey, a very early part of the hero's journey. We have this smarmy space cowboy, shit-talking space cowboy. And this wise old elder psychic guy. The characters have nothing to do with one another. They could not be less alike. I mean, which helps, especially when that's the first Star Wars movie. Back in 1978, Star Wars wasn't a thing. having the characters be that distinct from one another help tell them apart. It makes characterization much easier if the characters are very distinct, very dissimilar from one another. In Rogue One, all of the characters are very similar to one another. Disagree. The overlying theme, yes, the word hope actually shows up kind of annoyingly often in dialogue, but the real theme there is redemption. Absolutely every single character is, I've done bad things, and I'm a bad person because of that, and I want to be a better person. And I'm hoping that through personal sacrifice, and as it turns out, ultimate sacrifice, I will be redeemed and elevated above what I have become. All of them, including the robot. The robot's reprogrammed. So absolutely all of them are trying to redeem themselves. Compare that once again to the original Star Wars, where everyone has completely different motivations. And no one's like we're awful people and we need to redeem ourselves. There's nothing like that in the original Star Wars. With all these characters seeking redemption for awful deeds, and not just a particular thing they did on an off chance, but the things they had become. The Cassian, the male lead, is when we first introduced to him, he shoots a dude in the back. I mean, this is... and later on in the film, right before the climax, before the third act, he even flat out says, when it's like, oh, the Empire has a super weapon, so we're going to break up the rebellion because we can't fight a super weapon like this. And at that point, I'm jumping all over the place, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep doing it. Cassian at that point is like, whoa, huh? Break up the rebellion. Like, look, I did terrible, terrible things for the rebellion. If it just breaks up, like it's just some temporary thing without a strong moral core, then I'm just a killer. I'm just a murderer. To its credit, this movie never used the word terrorist, but there were clearly heroes who were terrorists in this movie. Saw Gerrera comes to mind immediately. But even then, everyone's defensible. Everyone does dark, sinister things, and their actions are defensible. Even Saw Gerrera we shoot civilians and shit like that. We throw bombs into areas where we know civilians are, vis-a-vis the little girl that Jin has to try to rescue in the middle of a gunfight, because Saw Gerrera's rebellion they're sitting there shooting up a plaza with a bunch of innocent bystanders. But Saw Gerrera could come around and say, well, you guys do shit too, and we're just doing what we feel we need to do. It blurs a line in a way that I think the prequels wanted to, but George Lucas was way too inept to even get close to that. There's no way George Lucas could have done that competently. And this movie did very well. Although I'm kind of showing my hand a little bit, because I like that blurring of good and evil. I have a couple problems with Star Wars, one of which is the utter black and white. You're either with the Force or the dark side of the Force. You're good or you're evil. Period. I thought it would be unlikely that someone would see this movie and not like it, because even if you weren't invested into the dark, gritty, which was definitely a departure for Star Wars, with the possible exception of Empire, and allegedly the last prequel movie, whose name I can't even be bothered to remember. But even if you didn't like that, it has a lot of the Star Wars-y stuff and elements. It does not have any Jedi, not a single one. And I think that's a cool thing, and I'm going to get back to that too. First things first. So even if you didn't like the story or even the characters, like I said, they're all in the same boat, which is to say these are a lot of very similar characters, much more similar than in any previous film that I can think of, any previous Star Wars film. Because they're all on the same journey of redemption. While they have different origins and different characterizations, they're much closer to one another, which I guess leads to that sort of camaraderie between them, that understanding, especially right. It had so much Star Wars-y stuff and good action stuff, and in my mind, the best Star Wars villain ever. And yes, I will flat out say that that was the best Star Wars villain ever. I wanted to see who the hell played that guy. I liked Cassian, but Krennic. Ben Mendelsohn? Mendelsohn was the Krennic guy. Why I think he's the best Star Wars villain ever. Because we understand his motivations, first of all. One problem with Star Wars, one of many problems with Star Wars, is that motivations aren't clear. Like, particularly in the prequels, what do the Jedi want? They want to be, I'd say peaceful, but, there isn't a movie where Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up and he has a corporeal form that he doesn't dismember someone. He flat out does that in every movie he's still alive. At least one person cuts a dude in half, cuts off someone's arm, cuts off all of Anakin's limbs. I mean, he's a dismembering machine. He's a force-using, dismembering space psychic guy. And so they're not really a peaceful organization. They kidnap children and indoctrinate them into their very extreme lifestyle at a young age. So for what? For why? Okay, so they cannot love. Oh, well, then what the fuck is their motivation? Pre-Empire, when they don't have this obvious significant foe, what do they do? What do they want? And the Sith are kind of the same way. They're just plain evil for the sake of being evil. In the first three movies, what does the Emperor want to do? I mean, he's essential. I mean, the only motivation we can apply to him is he already is the Emperor of the Empire. What more power? He wants to be extra super Emperor, God Emperor. He has no place to go and nothing to achieve other than the utter destruction of his enemies, which seems, particularly in the first Star Wars film, which seems kind of petty almost, as his enemies are so puny at that point. In Rogue One, we kind of walk back a little bit and say, okay, at this point, right before he had the Death Star, Darth Vader's like, no, we're not blowing up planets yet. We're not telling there is no Death Star. Officially, there is no Death Star. We don't need that kind of heat from the Senate. So, okay, so we're still worried about the Senate. All right, so his power isn't complete. Contextually, that makes the Emperor make a little more sense. But back to Krennic. Krennic wants to be... he wants the prestige of running the Death Star, a project that he himself thought up, helped develop, get the guys who can make the thing. It's his baby, and he wants the credit for it. He's a very ambitious man who wants more political and military power through the specific ends of getting the Death Star to work, and then, building the thing, and then getting it to work, and then running it, again, getting in charge of it. That's what he wants. He wants to be in charge of the Death Star. He wants Grand Moff Tarkin's job from the first Star Wars film. He's simple and straightforward. And, well, how on earth could I say he's better than Darth Vader? Well, like I said, there's a motivation problem with Darth Vader. Second of all, Darth Vader is way more powerful than everyone else. To the point he's so powerful, it's almost not a character. It doesn't really become a character until kind of in Empire and definitely in Jedi, but in the first film he's just a force to be reckoned with. He's just this guy who's in charge of a bunch of stuff, tells stormtroopers what to do, and uses his magic powers and laser sword, along with his other psychic powers, to just rule over shit and be scary. He's too powerful and too, faceless for a guy wearing a space helmet. Krennic is a guy. He's just a guy. He's a very powerful guy, an ambitious guy, a skilled guy, a canny guy. So he has skills and abilities, and he uses them to his own end. And it's not a stupid, thing he desires. He doesn't want to eat babies or murder Ewoks or any of this shit. He literally just wants to run the super weapon that he helped design, that he helped thought up, and that he thought would bring him great political prestige and what have you. So he's a complete villain who makes sense in his very human and his human weaknesses. He is ultimately just shot. So as Star Wars goes, I kind of find him to be the best Star Wars villain. He's whole, but he's not so stupid powerful he can do anything. Like I said, they did better in Jedi, particularly when he becomes human, and it's ultimately the downfall of the Emperor. But for most of that series of films, he's just like a faceless psychic space warrior who's turned evil in a robot. It sounds like he's designed by a teenager, you know? He's a cyborg with psychic powers and a laser sword and an army of guys. And you see what I'm saying? Where Krennic has actual limitations that make it tense when he's threatening people, because he's just a guy, but at the same time he has a fair amount of martial power. And he's not dumb. He's portrayed as being very intelligent, with his Achilles heel being hubris. It's an interesting character. But moving on. Here's the thing. Some of the criticisms of this. Going down the list. One I heard, no one has an arc, and I disagree. Like I said, these characters are much more similar to each other, but everyone has a very clear arc. Once again, the arc is the same for all of the good guys. It's redemption, period. It's Jyn Erso, who had not turned evil. None of the good guys are seeking redemption because they've turned evil or wicked. They are not sinful or violent for the sake of violence, but they've in Jyn Erso's case, she just doesn't care anymore. I mean, she literally has that line where she's like, someone asks her, "Are you cool with, imperial flags?" Everyone's like, I can't really see them if you don't look up. Where she doesn't really see the difference between good and evil. And the Empire and the Rebellion, particularly when we see the Rebellion's extremists, kind of follows that. You can kind of see where she's coming from. It's like, well, the good guys are shooting guys in the back and blowing up marketplaces with children in them. She has a point. So she goes from being utterly cynical to, Saw Gerrera abandoned her at one point. Her parents disappeared because they got captured by the Empire. Mom was shot in front of her. She just doesn't care anymore. To, okay, everyone thinks her father is she discovers the hologram. Everyone thinks her father is a monster, and unbeknownst to her, someone they want to assassinate. To, okay, I'll redeem my father. I'll find my own faith. Like, maybe Saw Gerrera actually had a good reason for abandoning me. And he says with utter antipathy towards events around her, to someone who becomes like a cornerstone for, she says, hope loud, spitting back some of Cassian's own words at him. It's like, rebellions are built on hope. And kind of really just wants to redeem her father. Because once again, it's a Cassian story as well, where Cassian's like, I have to have a good cause. I have to be a part of a cause, and it has to be a good cause, or else I'm an awful person. Jyn Erso's in the same position. It's like, well, I have to redeem my father. He built this failsafe so that we could blow up the super weapon. But if no one finds out about it, then my father just helped build a super weapon. He's either a hero or a monster, depending on whether or not we're able to get these plans into the right person's hands. That is a really interesting and subtle story. It's not like a Care Bears story where we have to go to the castle and make the bad guy, warm his wicked heart. It's a desperate and subtle story of redemption. She's redeeming her father and herself by a renewed faith in herself. That's interesting, to me anyway. I don't think a lot of people caught that, though, or just didn't find it compelling. So anyway, there's that. I need to get something to drink. I'm talking too long. The other complaint I heard of this movie was a cash grab. That was a cheap cash grab, and I could not disagree more. And here's why. Here's my counter argument to this movie was just a cheap cash grab. It's a bunch of Star Wars stuff thrown into a movie, so you'll go see it no matter what. And there is some truth to that. I was going to see this movie no matter what. For fuck's sake, I saw all 3 prequel movies in the theater, and after the second one, I was like, oh god, this is terrible. This one's not going to be better, and we knew it going in. But here's my counter to that. If you're just making a cash grab, just a cheap movie, you don't even have to follow a simple script, the simple generic action movie script. You can just follow the standard Star Wars script. Make a bunch of distinct, fun characters, which they did not do. Like I said, these characters are very similar to each other. Even the robot is similar. The K2 robot is similar to the characters in that impetus towards redemption. He's a reprogrammed Imperial security droid. So they're not fun characters. There's not going to be a sequel to this. The characters were all killed. Which, if you're going to make just an easy one-off, throwaway cash grab, don't make a movie where everyone dies. Where all the main characters die. Where all the main characters die not knowing that they accomplished the thing that they're dying to do. I was talking with my housemate Dave, and both of us saw this movie and thought it reminded us of this sort of Chinese noir gangster thriller movies we saw back in the 80s and 90s, where not just Chinese and Hong Kong, but also Japanese films. There was like an entire genre of films like this where just everyone dies. You see the parallel there. And we like those kind of films, even though they're super depressing. And the funny thing about this Asian cinema, this particular genre, there's got to be a name for it, I just don't know it. Like Asian noir or something like that. Is that I could break them into 2 categories. Comedies, in the classical sense, where everyone dies, but it's for a good cause, and they know it. Or tragedies. Everyone dies, and they don't accomplish the thing they were trying to accomplish. They die for nothing. Up to and including, sometimes those movies have a comic relief character who usually dies in one of 2 ways. Either he's a comic relief character because he's foolish and low or immature or something like that. He's a buffoon in some way, and at the last minute, he sort of grows up, becomes a man, realizes himself. Like he grows out of the buffoonery, and at that moment the axe comes down. Like, so he has 1 minute of being a hero, a man, whatever have you, before he's dead. Or he's the fool up to the end, where he gets in like this sort of last laugh, like this sort of joke, like, like everyone has him, I don't know, sort of situation where everyone has him cornered, and he's like kind of like, it's like, oh, are you going to laugh now because we're about to shoot you? And it's like, oh, you don't have anything, or something like that. And he says something like, well, you're right, I don't have anything except this detonator. Fuck you. Like, you get what I'm saying, sort of the last laugh. And I think in this movie, K2 is in the former category, where throughout the film he's shown as being unempathetic, particularly towards Jyn Erso, and at the last minute he has this regretful, hopeful moment of like he's aware he's sacrificing himself. Once again, things you don't do in a fun cash grab. Have the comic relief shot to death. Am I wrong about that? I don't think I am. But he has that sort of moment where he gains real empathy, even a bit of humanity, and of course that's when he's done for. That's when he's dead. One tradition in Star Wars is the action figure, where we make a bunch of memorable characters and we market the shit out of them. George Lucas established that very early on. merchandising. That is where the fortune for these movies came from, the original Star Wars films. And once again, this doesn't... The accusation that this was a cash grab, it was just a cheap, let's just make some money in the off year between our sequels, our sequel trilogy, with Force Awakens, whatever the next one will be the end of this year, is that once again, there's not a lot of new toys out of this. And it's if you're making toys, and as an aside, I do actually want some toys from these. Because I like this movie the best. This is actually my favorite Star Wars film. And that's kind of why I'm defending my review, but also the film, because I liked it more than the others. So, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that's in this film that's in every Star Wars film. But at the same time, it added a lot of good elements. The beach troopers, the death troopers, which I just assume are just the same goddamn stormtroopers in specialized armor for different situations. They look neat. I like them, generally. Seeing AT-ATs again. Seeing AT-ATs do more than just be walking fortresses for little ships to King Kong down was cool. I like that. I like that a lot. And seeing them be dangerous and cool was very cool. Like, you know, when he hits him with a missile launcher, it kind of jerks to the side, but then it comes right back, and I was like, that's what I wanted to see. But going through these characters just briefly, okay, let's do this. New things that are in this film, because that's kind of the complaint. That's just a rehashing of old stuff and old ideas, and I think that's ridiculous. As far as the story goes, it's completely out there. Everyone sacrifices their lives to save the day, to give a tiny glimmer of hope that someone else might save the day. That is not a standard Star Wars trope. But let's go through the things that are new to this one. Chiru, a character I liked a lot, actually, is a guy who uses the Force but is not a Jedi. So, a guy using the Force who isn't a Jedi is awesome, because Jedi have too easy a way of things. Their magic powers are too much, and their laser swords are too much. The only time a lightsaber appears in this film is to fuck shit up, to be unstoppable, to be a representation of an unstoppable force vis-a-vis Darth Vader. Perfect. That's how it needed to be used. It didn't need to be whipped out every 5 freaking minutes like in every other Star Wars film since the prequels. It needed to be... there needed to be some moderation, and I thought this movie did a very good job with that. That in particular, the use of Jedi, or not use of Jedi. Other new stuff. KX security droids, I thought were excellent. That was an excellent idea. It kind of occurred to me before, like, why aren't there Imperial robots? I mean, I kind of get it. You have an army of stormtroopers with thousands, maybe even millions of them, and they're clone troopers, or at least some of them are. Even that's something that's kind of up in the air. So there should be some sort of Imperial droid. The only Imperial droids we see are the probe droid and the torture droid. The power droids, which are these little, looks like a toaster on wheels. And I think in the first Star Wars movie, the original Death Star had a whole bunch of Empire-colored R5 droids. Like, they were using astromech droids, which is why there was a port for R2-D2 to plug into, because there's lots of astromechs all over the place. And I like the the R5 form factor. I like those droids. But it seemed like there was a place for the KX security droid, and so it was a new thing. It was a brand new thing, but it felt like it fit in. Like I could see a point of having one. Like when a couple rebels show up with a KX security droid and some stormtroopers turn around, they just assume, oh, these must be your prisoner, because why else would you be accompanying them? I'm like, cool. I love that. I love that. It was very simple. It didn't need an explanation as to what a security droid was. I don't think even in the movie they really go into too much about what the fuck he is. Like, I only knew he was a security droid because I looked it up on Wikipedia. So K2 was my favorite character because, I mean, goddamn, just the ultra dry humor. Thinking about it, this is Marvin from Hitchhiker's Guide who gets shit done. This is the kind of gloomy, sarcastic robot, but he accomplishes a whole bunch of shit on his own. He's Marvin who kicks ass. And I'm on that. I'm on board with that. I would love to see another KX security droid in another movie opposite like an R5, like here's the thing. When I was a kid, I loved Star Wars, particularly the robots. It's always been a big thing with me. But having seen an alternative to C-3PO and R2-D2, like, I would take the K2 over C-3PO any day of the week. Because, I mean, well, let me ask you, which would you rather have? A mincing robot that knows all languages, that can barely go up and down stairs, or something that's tossing grenades and beating up guys and shooting people with blasters? While employing the driest comedy of any comic relief in the entire Star Wars franchise. It's an element I liked a lot. I'd like to see more of it. I hope, because like I said, some critics really did not care for this film. I hope that they don't veer away from this, because this is a direction I'd like them to delve into more. It's kind of the Cowardly Lion arc, I guess. It's like, yeah, no, you were brave all along and you didn't know it. I love this cat. I'm gonna keep going. I'm not gonna stop. No one will stop me. This is my cat review. My spoiler-rich cat review. So, okay. After Bodhi, we have... I'm keeping it. I don't care if there's a cat's butt in my face. Do you think I care? You're wrong. But now I've utterly lost my place, and I'm having a little trouble concentrating, because there is in fact a cat's butt in my face. Dude, come here. Get the fuck down. Okay. Cats. Alright. Here. This is the troublemaker I have. All the trouble in the world. What else? I want to finish this up real quick, but I want to hit a few more elements, one of which is Saw Gerrera. I'm told he had no arc. I disagree. He starts the movie being a friend of Mad Mikkelsen's character. What is it? Galen Erso. And clearly has a descent into madness, but it's all off screen because he's not a main character. He's more like he's a background character defining certain elements of the story. He epitomizes the, I don't know what else to call him, the terrorist faction of the rebels. Tell me I'm wrong on that one. Blowing up marketplaces full of innocent civilians to get at stormtroopers. So, Saw Gerrera goes clearly from the point where he rescues Jyn, we only see him very, very briefly, to the point where she meets up with him again, and we're told a lot of what happened since then in backstory. In sort of like, oh, you left me behind, you motherfucker, why should I give a shit about you? Look, they wanted an audience with you, I'm giving it to them, and that's it. And where he's like, did they send you to kill me? Where he's clearly physically not well. He's had a lot of his limbs and organs and shit like that replaced with robot parts. And he's clearly lost his mind. And that's interesting, because this is one of the, quote-unquote, the good guys. once again, the defining characteristic of this film versus other Star Wars films is there's that blurring of good and evil. I mean, this is a classic return, and it was necessary. This is a return to the original Star Wars movie. This movie literally ends like 5 minutes before the beginning of the 1978 Star Wars film. Unless you take a completely different take on this, once again, blurring the line of good and evil for these characters, for the rebels. Like, maybe the rebels aren't all that rosy, sweet, unicorn, sunshine, rainbow that they're portrayed as unalloyed good in every single other movie. Then maybe the characters themselves have to do things they're not proud of. And when Cassian actually says that line where he's like, look, I have to be following this cause. This cause has to mean something or else I'm just a killer, just a murderer. All of the characters agree with him. Baze. Yeah, Baze. And no one says his name. I think his name is actually said out loud once during the entire film. So it's kind of, there's a lot of characters. But Baze and Chiro are allegedly temple guards. They're guards who guard the temple, but the temple's been ransacked, so there's no temple for them to guard anymore. So they're kind of lost cause characters who are kind of like, this is what the Force is telling. Look, the Force is telling me what to do, and Baze has got my back. So that's their arc. They're pointless because the reason they exist doesn't exist anymore, and indeed the entire temple's destroyed midway through this movie. So they find a cause and are killed defending it, holding that cause. I can dig it. In hindsight, maybe that will help me predict these a little better. I should have seen that more people wouldn't like this film. Like I said, in closing, I like this film a lot. This is my favorite Star Wars film. I can't think of another one I liked more. I liked Force Awakens a lot, and I get the complaint that these aren't very charismatic characters. They're not meant to be. They're not meant to be like the first film stand-ins for Flash Gordon characters. But at the same time, that was their appeal to me. Their humanity, their grittiness. The characters themselves were gritty and deeply flawed. And they don't really try to overcome their flaws, but work with them to redeem themselves for what they've become. It's getting complicated. Anyway, that's my spiel for this. Like and subscribe if you're inclined to, and check out minds.com as an aside. I have a page there, and I'm kind of digging Minds. I'm babbling. I'm out.